Sully here. Welcome to Transitions, my YouTube channel. Before I get started, I would like to invite you to subscribe to my channel if you don't already. You'll get to see more of what I've been doing since I retired from driving a tractor trailer. I drove for 25 years, and back problems forced me to retire a little bit earlier than I had planned. So here I am making YouTube videos. Hopefully something will come of it, but not without your help. Please subscribe, like, and share these videos. And if you're so inclined and it's within your means, please go to my Patreon page and become a sponsor. Well, today I am going to talk about something that is probably the most overblown story in sports. Now, apparently, people seem to think that Philadelphia sports fans are tough. For instance, at the NFC Championship game for the 2017 season, fans were complaining that the Eagles fans were rude, that they were mean, that they were calling them names. Now, I'll be the first one to admit that there are some idiots out there who insist on going down to the stadium and tailgating in the parking lot even though they don't have a ticket to the game, and they wind up getting drunk. And many of them are kind of young and still don't know how to handle that beer or whatever it is they're putting in their body. And they think that boorish behavior is actually expected of them. Well, it's not. I have to admit, I've been in a lot of games where I have heard Philly sports fans booing. I think it was Bob Uecker who said, Philadelphia fans are so tough they would boo unwed mothers on Mother's Day. Well, he may have had a point there. Yes, we are tough fans, but we're fair. For instance, if the Giants or Redskins are in town, their fans seem to understand that it's just business, nothing personal. I've been down at games where I've been tailgating, and some of the best times I've had with opposing teams' fans have been with Giants and Redskins fans, because they get it, they understand. Dallas Cowboys fans, on the other hand, they're actually kind of snobbish. Oh, we're America's team. We don't go to these bitter cold games wearing parkas and eating raw bear meat and drinking homemade mead like they do in Philadelphia. Well, yeah, their tailgate parties consist of wine and hors d'oeuvres down in Dallas. So, goes to tell you what I think of them. Anyway, if you are an Eagles fan, I suggest you get this book, The New Eagles Encyclopedia, by Hall of Fame writer Ray Didinger. Ray Didinger is a member of the Writers Wing of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and this book is a good read. This was a Christmas present from my older sister, Rita Ann, and her husband, Dennis. And he surprised me with it. No, it was a birthday present. Yeah, it was a birthday present. And it's a good read. Even though my brother-in-law roots for the stinking Giants. So, what do I mean by the most overblown incident? Well, it happened in 1968. Now, in 1968, the Eagles went out and lost their first 11 games. They didn't win a game until week 12 when they were playing on Thanksgiving Day in rainy Tiger Stadium, and they beat the Detroit Lions on a very sloppy, very muddy field. The next week, they went down to Tulane Stadium and beat the then expansion New Orleans Saints. 2 wins. 2 in a row. Now, that was the year that O.J. Simpson was a senior at USC. And it was also the first year that the AFL and NFL were going to have a combined draft. The first step that they took before the merger of the two leagues to create the NFL that we know today. Prior to that, AFL and NFL teams held separate drafts, and players were free to sign with whatever team drafted them of either league. And the first step of cooperation, well, I guess maybe the first step of cooperation was the Super Bowl. And then it was the combined draft, and then the eventual merger. But in 1968, the Eagles, after losing their first 11 games, looked like a lock to get the first overall draft pick. Then they went out and won 2 in a row. And they lost out on their chance to draft O.J. Simpson. So, the final game of the season. Fans were in a foul mood. If you're going to screw up, at least screw up right and let us get the first draft pick. And they couldn't even do that. The Eagles wound up with the 3rd overall draft pick. And although they didn't get O.J. Simpson, they did get Leroy Keys. Leroy Keys. Leroy Keys. Never heard of him, huh? Well, not too many people around here seem to have heard of him, or at least remember him, because he had what was called an unmemorable career. Leroy Keys was drafted as a running back out of Purdue. Now, I know he played on the football team, but he was more known for track. But there was no professional track in 1968 or 69. Actually, it was his rookie year for the Eagles. But as a running back, he wasn't very good. I mean, it did make a difference because back then the Eagles weren't very good either. In fact, they were so bad and the fans were so jaded that somebody actually rented an airplane to tow a banner that said "Joe must go," calling for the firing of head coach Joe Kuharich. Kuharich had been a successful coach at Notre Dame prior to the Ara Parsegian era, but didn't seem to do too good in the NFL. But let's go to the final game of the 1968 season, shall we? The Eagles were playing the Vikings. Now, when the fans showed up for the game that day, they found out that their seats were covered in snow. There had been a snowstorm the night before, and apparently there was a disagreement between the Eagles and their landlord, which was the University of Pennsylvania, over who should remove the snow from Franklin Field. So apparently the Eagles put the word out that anybody who showed up with a snow shovel would receive a free ticket. Now, I guess a ticket cost maybe $4 or $5 in those days. And a lot of people showed up. Now, there was also no beer sales in Franklin Field because the university didn't have a liquor license for the stadium. And Sunday sales were prohibited anyway in Pennsylvania at the time, although certain exceptions could be granted, and I believe athletic teams could receive an exception. But the Eagles never bothered because they couldn't get one anyway because it was the landlord's responsibility, and the University of Pennsylvania didn't want beer served. However, there was no problem with people bringing their own in. So people brought their own in. Now, one of the fans at that game was a 19-year-old fellow from South Philly named Frank Olivo. Now, Frank Olivo was a season ticket holder, and it was his tradition for the last game of the year to show up dressed as Santa Claus. He would put on kind of a cheesy Santa costume, a real cheesy fake beard, and he showed up at the game and wished everybody Merry Christmas. Now, because it was the last game of the Eagles season, they planned on having what was called a Christmas pageant. Now, the fans were already in an ill humor because the Eagles were losing the game, and the fans just were in a foul mood, showing up to snow-covered seats, showing up to cold weather, showing up to a team that had screwed up by winning its previous 2 games, And according to Frank Olivo, the fans were booing everything. Now, other people who claim to have been at that game were future Eagles special teams captain Vince Papale and Ray Didinger, of course, as I mentioned earlier, the author of the Eagles Encyclopedia. And just, there was all this anger and frustration with the fans. I mean, it had been 1960 since the Eagles last put a competitive team on the field. 1960 was the year that the Eagles had nothing but a championship. They were not a great team that year, but they just happened to do it right when it counted. And the 1960 Eagles, by the way, were the only team to ever defeat a Vince Lombardi coached team in a playoff game. And that's a fact. But this was 8 years later, and the Eagles had done nothing but slide since 1960, and it was just total frustration. So, the plan was to have this big Christmas pageant. Unfortunately, Santa couldn't make it. The fellow who was supposed to play Santa Claus, and he was a professional Santa Claus, he had a nice costume, had an actual beard that he grew. He was supposed to play Santa in the pageant, but he couldn't get out of his driveway because of the snowstorm. So, a frantic search to find a replacement Santa Claus, somebody spotted Olivo in the stands, and they went down to him and they said, okay, we just want you to run out on the field, or we say, here comes Santa Claus. You're going to carry this bag, it's supposed to be a bag of presents. You just walk out on the field and wave high, and we'll play Santa saying, Merry Christmas, over the loudspeaker, and all you have to do is wave. And from what I heard, legend says they even offered him a few bucks to do it. Now, 19-year-old kid, sure, why not? I show up for the game dressed as Santa Claus, here I can walk out on the field. Well, it was lousy football, it was bad weather, and somebody threw a snowball at Olivo and said, you're not getting anything for Christmas. That's it. One snowball. One snowball. How did the legend grow? 2 words. Howard Cosell. On his weekly radio broadcast that night, Howard Cosell reported the incident. And by the time people got done listening to Cosell, you would think that 72,000 people pelted Father Christmas with snowballs. The fact of the matter is, one snowball was thrown. So, did they really throw snowballs at Santa Claus? The answer is no. Oh, people who claimed they were there said, oh yeah, people were heaving snowballs from the upper deck. Well, karma has a way of biting people in the ass. Because 2 years later, the first season of Monday Night Football, there was a game scheduled between the Eagles and the Giants. And as we all know, Howard Cosell was part of the broadcasting team for Monday Night Football, along with Keith Jackson and Dandy Don Meredith. Now, this was a particularly cold night. Now, I'm not telling tales out of school when I say that I was at that game. I was at that Monday night game in 1970. I was a freshman in high school, and I was looking forward to the game all day, knowing that the next day at school I'd be going there with about 3 hours sleep. I was going to the game. My father had season tickets back then, And a few weeks earlier, my father took a heart attack and was still in the hospital. Now, I was supposed to go to the game with my father because my father had season tickets with his brother-in-law, my Uncle John. And Uncle John was a supervisor for a construction company, and he was doing a job out of town, and he couldn't be there. So he gave my father his last 3 tickets, and what the plan was to take me. But my father was in the hospital, so one of his bowling buddies took me to the game. Okay, 14 years old, going to a Monday night football game. Yeah, it's probably a good idea to have somebody with you. But I will tell you that it was cold that night. It was freezing cold. Now, you can go on YouTube and see the intro to that game where Howard Cosell and Don Meredith are talking, and it was about at kickoff time. I think that Keith Jackson said it was like 30 degrees. It was colder than that. It was more like 20 degrees. And there was a wind hawking in through the open end of Franklin Field. It was freezing cold. That's all I can tell you because I was there. And if you look at the YouTube video showing the pregame remarks that Cosell was making, he was sweating profusely. The man had a fever of 102 degrees. He should not have been there. He should have never showed up in the first place. He had a virus. He was as sick as a dog. Now, Howard Cosell was a man who did like to take a drink, although seldom to excess. And apparently, he had a martini or 2 at lunch. But by the time 9 o'clock rolled around, the effects of those martinis had worn off. But he was sick. You could see he was sweating in sub-freezing weather. And it got so bad that during the halftime report, Cosell was incoherent. He was slurring his speech. He was having a hard time focusing because he was sick with a virus. His temperature had spiked to 103 degrees. Well, Monday Night Football's producer, Rune Arledge, asked him what was wrong. And he just told him, hey, look, I don't think I can go on. He said, okay, I'll see if I can make arrangements to get you home. So they went back into the broadcast booth, and Cosell got sick. He threw up. And some of it landed on Don Meredith's coat. At that point, Arledge said, okay, that's it, I'm sending you home. He called 2 firefighters to escort Cosell from the broadcast booth to a taxi waiting outside, gave the taxi driver $200 and Cosell's address in New York and said, take him home. Well, first of all, Franklin Field was an old stadium. I think it was built, what, in 1895 or something? I'll have to look that up. That's right, Franklin Field was built in 1895. So, the only way out of the press box was a catwalk, which led to the seating area of the lower deck of Franklin, the lower bowl of Franklin Field. There was no ramps, no stairways, certainly no escalators. There was only one way up, and that was the aisles between the seats. And those of us who saw games in Franklin Field used to refer to that as Cardiac Cliff. Well, the only way in and the only way out of the press box is down the little catwalk and through the seating area. And Cosell was seen being helped out of the press box and down the stairs by 2 Philadelphia firefighters with Rune Arledge close behind. And he was sick, he wasn't feeling good, and right away the rumors started. Cosell is drunk. Well, as Winston Churchill said, a lie travels halfway around the world before the truth has a chance to put its pants on. So, the rumor has it, and there are people who say to this day, yeah, I saw Cosell. They had a party in the press box. Party in the press box at Franklin Field. The press box at Franklin Field is like about that big across. What kind of a party can you have there? There was barely enough room for somebody to stand up or turn around. There was no party in the press box. But people say they were there. Now, yeah, I was at that game, and yes, I heard the rumors that Cosell was drunk and being helped out. And later I read in the paper that Cosell became ill with a virus. And that was the story. But the dramatization that came as a result of it had Cosell getting plastered. And Leonard Toews sent up bottles of vodka and brandy and all that stuff. But the fact of the matter is, Toews never sent anything up there. Toews, I mean, at the time he was a trucking company owner. And as it turned out, he was also an alcoholic and a degenerate gambler that nearly lost the Eagles because of both. Wound up selling it to Norman Brayman, who, for my money, was the worst owner the Eagles ever had. Leonard Toews was just a victim of the demons that haunted him. And he is still beloved here in Philadelphia. But he never sent any alcohol to the press box, and Cosell wasn't drinking in the press box. And both Meredith and Jackson confirmed that. Cosell wasn't drinking. He was sick. He had been sick all day. Yes, he had a couple martinis with lunch, but he was stone cold sober when he came to the ballpark. He was just sick. The man was sweating in 20-degree weather, wearing a heavy coat, and he was sweating in 20-degree weather. But that's karma for you. Cosell began the Santa Claus legend, and he was paid back by a legend of his own. So, Howard Cosell wasn't drunk at the Monday night game, and the Eagles fans did not throw snowballs at Santa Claus. Oh, well, one snowball. I hope you learned something today. Philadelphia is the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection. You've got a problem with that? For Transitions, this has been Sully, the retired tanker yanker. Safe and happy travels.